The bright side of addiction is recovery. And recovery is its own best reward. If you're in recovery, know or love someone who is, or you simply want to find out more about the recovery process, or maybe you're a bit concerned about someone you know or love who is harmfully using alcohol or any other drug, this is the podcast for you as we carry the message of hope and the promise of recovery. And a reminder, you can find all of our podcasts at recoverycoasttocoast.org. Recent episodes have featured an historic interview that I did 41 years ago with Betty Ford. Actor John Larroquette has been on Recovery Coast to Coast, astronaut Buzz Aldrin, musician Bonnie Raitt, authors Brene Brown, Anne Lamott, J.A. Jance, former NFL players Ryan Leaf and Thomas Hollywood Henderson. All these interviews and more on our website, plus conversations with everyday people in long-term recovery, sharing their story, their insight, their path. Welcome to Recovery Coast to Coast, the national podcast. We're going to talk with a very successful businessman who 11 years ago had to be put into an induced coma to prevent possible death due to his drinking, as he was in acute detox. Now, he survived and is thriving in long-term recovery, a different kind of recovery. Here's a quick clip.
My weekend drinks, started to be Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Then it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, then Wednesday, then Tuesday. And then 5 o'clock went to 4 o'clock to 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock in the morning. And then it went to not even a drink. I would just pour vodka in a glass and drink straight vodka, all without David's knowledge.
My conversation with Bob Sttedman is coming right up. I'm Neil Scott, host of Recovery Coast to Coast, with a couple of simple words, and they are simply thank you. Thank you for listening to our podcast. There's a lot of them out there, and the fact that you're listening to ours, I'm very grateful for that. Our website is recoverycoasttocoast.org. Following 17 years of nightly broadcasting on iHeartRadio in Seattle, our podcast features interviews with everyday people in recovery, as well as clinicians, authors, and recovering celebrities who offer the promise of hope and the reality of recovery, plus well-vetted resources for individuals, families, and friends. We invite you to enjoy it and to share it with your friends as well, because recovery is an American way of life. A reminder that our email address is recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net, and we'd love to hear from you. Recovery Coast to Coast, supported by Sundown M Ranch, one of America's oldest, least expensive, and most successful treatment centers. Treatment doesn't cost. It saves. It saves lives, it saves families, it saves jobs, and a lot more. Now, the good news is that at Sundown M Ranch, the cost of treatment, by the way, is among the lowest in the country, is covered by most major insurance companies. Of course, every policy is different. Some have varying copays. And if that's a problem, they can work with you to get the copay financed by a reputable healthcare financer. And Sundown has a top-notch administrative team. They can sort out the insurance maze. You don't have to do it yourself. They will handle it. And they'll do it with compassion, integrity, and confidentiality. The reason their costs are so low is that they own their own land, 30 acres of gorgeous land at the mouth of the Yakima River Canyon outside of Seattle. Their bottom line is single-focused recovery. And a great number of their staff, which has been together for a long time, by the way, have been where you are. They can help you navigate the admission process. By the way, Sundown M Ranch has an award-winning adolescent program as well, providing medical services to young people who are in need of help, living quarters separate, male and female. Be sure and check out their facility and their state-of-the-art treatment services, including photos of their campus at sundown.org. It's where recovery begins. Sundown.org. Well, as I pour myself a cup of coffee, I invite you to listen to my recent conversation with Bob Sttedman. He's one of the most successful real estate management brokers in Western Washington, who was precariously close to death 11 years ago from alcoholism.
My story is I think is very different than a lot of folks, because I never really had an issue with alcohol until my ex-partner and I, we were together 15 years. We've got 2 kids. He had an affair, moved on, and mind you, I was a VP at Wells Fargo, And when we adopted our first son, I left my job to be a stay-at-home parent. I was home for 8 years. So I was out of the workforce for 8 years. And then all of a sudden, I've got to go back to the workforce. Here I am almost 50 years old, and I've got to go back and get a job. Who's going to hire a 50-year-old that hasn't been working for the last 8-9 years? And long story short, we were more social drinkers when we were together. We'd have drinks on the weekends and whatever. I never really had an issue with alcohol, but then I basically, for the next year and a half or 2 years, 3 years, I was just self-medicating, and it just got out of control. And literally in that 3-year period, I became repartnered. And then he moved here from North Carolina. We moved in together, and I was drinking. I mean, I had an issue with alcohol while he was living with me, and he didn't even know it because I was sneaking it. Long story short, we had gone back to Charlotte to his dad was having bypass surgery, and we went back there, and that's when I basically went into detox because I didn't have any alcohol in my body. And I almost died. I mean, I was in the ICU for 11 days. They put me in a medically induced coma for 5 days. Once I got out of there, so that happened in April. And once I got out of there, I never had a drink since. And I don't have a desire to. I've never, I don't crave it. I don't go to AA meetings. I don't do anything. I mean, I just live a normal life. In fact, we have friends that come over. I'll make them cocktails. I don't have a desire to. My doctor, when I spoke with my doctor, we talked about it, and he says, he goes, not that I'm encouraging you to become a social drinker again or whatever. He says, but you probably, could and not have a problem. And I just don't risk it. It's not that important to me. I just don't risk it.
Have there been any temptations along the way in the 11 years? Any crises or
never?
Nothing.
Never once.
Nothing.
Never once. And I'm around, when I say I'm around alcohol, I mean, my friends, I go to when we go out for, when I go out for dinner, everybody has drinks. I don't. I have a Diet Coke or water or something like that. We have friends that come over. We just had friends over 2 weekends ago. Everybody was drinking cocktails out on our deck, and I was having Diet Coke. I was making people. I was going and making people drink. I don't have a desire for it, and I just never had it. When I talk about my sobriety, to people, I take it very seriously because I have 3 friends that died from alcohol. Okay. And the struggle that they went through, the daily struggles just to get through the day was, it was incredible for them, what they would go through. And I just don't have that. But for me, I talk about my sobriety as I take it very seriously. And that's why I don't have a drink or anything like that.
Tell me about, again, the North Carolina experience, how you wound up in detox. Was there a specific event?
So what happened was when we got there, his dad was already, in the hospital because he was getting prepped for surgery. Or I think maybe the day we got there, he was still home, and they went that day to bring him in, and then, or 2 days later, I forget the exact timing, but the bottom line is that, they're not a family that drinks a lot. There's no alcohol in their house, so they're not drinkers. So I got there, and then there was no alcohol, and my body started to crave it. I mean, it was looking for alcohol, and there was none. So I kind of just ignored it. I didn't, I just thought, well, no big deal. I just won't have a drink. And then it only took a matter of a day where I was fidgety, my body was shaking, my hands were shaking. And then it just progressively got worse and worse over the next couple of days. It took only like 2 days. And then we had gone to the hospital to see his dad, and my blood pressure had gotten super elevated, and I was basically going through detox. My body was reacting. It was looking for alcohol, and it wasn't getting it. It was reacting to not having the alcohol. And it just got worse and worse and worse. And then finally I passed out, and then the doctors started checking me out, and then they started asking David, well, how much alcohol does he drink? Because I think he's going through a detox here. And David's like, well, he doesn't drink that much at all. And that's when I was kind of with it at that point. And I kind of said, no, I drink a lot. Anyway, so that's how it all happened. And then my blood pressure had gotten to a point where it was some ridiculously high level. I mean, like 190 over 200 or something like that. they were giving me different types of medication to bring my blood pressure down, and nothing was doing it. And they basically told David that they said, we're going to have to put him in a medically induced coma to bring his blood pressure down, because if we don't, he's either going to have a massive heart attack or a massive stroke or both, and he's going to die. So they put me in a medically induced coma for probably about 5 days. I was in ICU for a total of 11 days. And then, they let me out. But it took me a good month, 3 or 4 weeks to get to where my body was getting back to normal. I mean, I was still a little shaky. We had to come back. We had to fly home. And, I was a little shaky, but progressively my body got, it recovered more and more. But that's how it happened. I mean, that's really what happened. And David did, so what happened was, my drinking, I would, when my ex and I split up, I was basically self-medicating is what my doc said. We talked about it. I mean, I went to therapy. I went to all kinds of things. And my doc said that I was self-medicating. I was never really drunk. I mean, nobody knew it. Nobody around me knew that I was drinking as much as I was. So my weekend drinks, started to be Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Then it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, then Wednesday, then Tuesday. And then 5 o'clock went to 4 o'clock to 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock in the morning. And then it went to not even a drink. I would just take, I would just pour vodka in a glass and drink straight vodka.
All without David's knowledge.
All without David's knowledge. And he didn't know it.
How did all of this affect your partner, David? I mean, here's a guy who's in a partnership with you. He didn't even realize how serious it was, and suddenly you're facing death.
Well, and we were only together about a year. I mean, and he could have just said, you know what, I didn't sign up for this, I'm out, and he could have walked away, but he didn't. He didn't, and we're still together. I mean, couldn't be happier. He stuck by me, and he just said, because he knew what I went through, and he was in a long-term relationship where that had ended as well, and his was definitely ended more amicably than mine. Mine was just it was a rough. My ex-partner, not only did he have an affair, with somebody that he met, that we were all friends. So the deceit, the betrayal and all that was the first thing. And then he got ugly about it because, he threatened to take the boys away from me. It was all about threat. And it was a really bad time for me. And it was, I was going through all these whirlwind of emotions. It was, I was upset about my relationship. I was pissed about my relationship, the way it ended because of how it ended. I was scared to death because I didn't know what to do. We had built this incredible life. I mean, we had these 2 kids. We built this beautiful home in Madison Park. I was a stay-at-home dad. He was in the process of, they had started a mortgage company. We were living very, very well, and I was scared to death. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what my future was like, and I was drowning myself in alcohol. I mean, it was, as I said, self-medicating myself. And I think what happened was I was in denial about it because I thought, well, I don't have a drinking problem. It's just me. I can stop this any day of the week, but I couldn't. And I would try. Like, I'd get up in the morning and I would say, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to have anything today. I'm not going to drink anything today. And I'd get till about noon and I would drink. And that's really what happened.
When you left North Carolina and came back home, what was that first year like?
This happened in April. So we were home by the end of April. I say April 4th is my sobriety date because that's the date where I was released from the hospital. And I say, well, I haven't had a drink since then. That was the date that I was released from the hospital. And then we didn't leave to come back for about a week. So when I first got back, and I was very open about what happened. I have a lot of friends, and I was very open about what happened. So I didn't, because there's a lot of shame involved in that and what have you. But I thought, you know what, I'm going to let people know what happened because I'm going to recover from this. I'm going to turn this into a positive. So then the month of May, I was getting better through the month of May and what have you. And I'm still not working. And David, my partner, is a real estate broker, had been for many, many years. He kept telling me, you need to get into real estate. You need to get into real estate. So Memorial Day weekend, I got online and I looked for the real estate class called Rockwell here in Washington. And there was a class starting in 3 days, and I enrolled in that class. And by the end of June, I had gone through the class, I had my license, and I was working at Coldwell Banker Bain. And now I manage the highest producing real estate office in the whole state.
Wow.
So basically, April 4th, the end of March, beginning of April, I was in a coma, almost died. And then by June, I had a real estate license, and I started selling real estate, and I haven't looked back since.
How did your sons react to all of this?
Well, back then, they were super young. I mean, right now, my youngest just turned 21 yesterday, and Zach is 22. And back then, so they were, they were young. They were 9 and 10, I think. So we didn't really tell them much. They didn't know much. But they know now. I've shared it all with them because I don't want them to, there's so many things out there between drugs and alcohol and whatever, and I don't want them to fall into stuff. I want them to be aware of how quickly alcohol can grab a hold of you and have a vice on you, and you get addicted to it. And the same thing with drugs. I mean, I've never done drugs in my entire life, but alcohol, that was, our society revolves around alcohol. Everything is social. Let's go to happy hour. Let's go get a drink. Let's go have cocktails. Our society revolves around alcohol and cocktails. And, I watch them now. I mean, they go out with their friends. They drink. They've had their moments. They've gotten, shit-faced drunk. But I'm very open about what I went through. I mean, and I talk about it to lots of people, because I don't, I'm not ashamed of it. You know what I'm saying? I wish I could turn back the clocks and go back to that time. I would definitely do things differently. But I've also looked back and say to myself, well, if that didn't happen the way it did, would I be here where I am today?
When you're in a social gathering and someone says, hey, Bob, how come you're not drinking? What do you say?
I tell them, I say, I don't drink because I had an issue with alcohol, and I don't care to have any more issues with alcohol. And then, some people will be bold and they'll say, oh, well, what happened? Or tell me about it. And I'll tell them the whole story. I mean, I share it. As I said, I'm not ashamed of it. I tell them exactly what happened. And other people, oh, yeah, I respect that. And I don't want anybody, the one thing that I don't want is for people to feel like when they're around me, they can't have a drink. They can't be social or what have you, because that's not what it's about. I want people can enjoy their alcohol the way they want to. So I just don't make a big deal of it. I don't, that's the other thing too. If somebody, asks me if you want to, what can I make you? No, do you have any Diet Coke? Or do you have I'll just have some water, and if people ask, then I'll tell them, but I don't make a big deal out of it because I don't want other people to feel uncomfortable, because I have friends, we have some friends from North Carolina that haven't been here to visit us since that happened, because they're big drinkers, and I know that they feel uncomfortable drinking around me because they're big drinkers. I mean, they are party drinkers. That's their issue, though. It's not mine. And, so, I don't want them to feel uncomfortable, so I don't really discuss it, but, that's them. People appreciate hearing about it, and then what's really bizarre, not bizarre, but what's, interesting is that every year on April 4th, I put a post out there, and I think you probably saw the post about my sobriety. And I talk about, it's 11 years, it's 10 years, it's what have you. And I will get hundreds and hundreds of comments and likes and things like that on that post. Every single year, I will get no less than 5 or 10 private messages. I think I might have a problem. Can we chat? I think I might have. How did you get past it? How did you, and I'm not exaggerating. I mean, so people will reach out to me and just say, how did you do it?
What do you tell them?
I just tell them what happened, and I tell them the story, and I just say, it's everybody's different, and I just say, if you really feel that you have an issue with alcohol, I highly, highly recommend you seek some help for it. Try to get some help, whether it's through therapy or, talk to other folks that have gone through it, or talk to your doctors, talk to a therapist, whatever it is that's going to help you. Because as I said, I have 3 friends that died from alcohol-related issues. One of my friends was only 40 years old. My boys, we have some neighbor friends. They have 3 boys and I have 2, and they all grew up together, best of friends. And Mark, the dad, he had an issue with alcohol. It got worse and worse and worse. He was in an unfortunate situation because he tried to stop drinking, and his wife was an enabler. I mean, she was just a very strong personality, not a nice person, but she had a very, very strong personality. very successful business person and what have you. But she was under the impression that it's okay. I'll just watch you. You can have a glass of wine or you can have a beer. It's okay. No, Mark, you need to stop. But she would encourage him because she would drink at the house and she didn't care. When you have somebody that has that bad of a drinking problem in your household, you can't drink around them. You got to help. You're not helping them by drinking around them. You're actually hurting them by drinking around them. And I think, and he eventually drank himself to death. And he was only 50 years old when he died. And they were getting divorced. So it got worse. His drinking just got worse and worse because the pressure got worse and worse on him. But as I said, for me, I have a colleague friend too, who has been sober for almost 30 years, and every single day is still a struggle for him. For me, that's the part that it was funny because he doesn't understand how I don't struggle, and I don't understand how he, after 30 years, still struggles.
Amazing. Yeah, so you didn't what they call white knuckle it during those first months and years.
Not at all.
What is life like for you in year 11, Bob?
I mean, it's pretty amazing. I mean, I've got a great partner. I reinvented myself, after being a stay-at-home dad for 8 years. I mean, when I was home, I was doing all that, the PTA president stuff, and I was super involved. I got involved in a couple of charities. I did things like that. But I reinvented my business, my work life and my life. I mean, I was a VP at Wells Fargo, and before I left to become a stay-at-home dad, and I had a pretty good career. I mean, I was an okay job. I didn't love my job, but I didn't hate it. It was an okay job, and I did okay. To today, as I said, I reinvented myself. I got a real estate license. I started selling real estate. The next thing I know, I'm in a management development program. And then the next thing I know, I'm managing an office for Coldwell Banker Bain. And then I get recruited away to Windermere. And now I'm managing the highest producing office in the whole state. This office does $2 billion in volume every year. I've got 140 brokers, and I'm super successful. Built a great, and I absolutely love my job. I've never been able to say that I love what I do. Today I can say that I absolutely love what I do. I go out with these brokers all the time, and they drink like fish, and they all know my story. I share it, and I'm not like out there peddling this all day long. If people ask me, I share it. And a lot of people are aware because I do make that post every year, so they see it, and they'll ask me about it and stuff like that. So people know, and it's been super, what's the right word? I don't know what the right word is, but I find it, for me, it's been, I share it because I feel like if I'm helping other people realize that maybe they have an issue with it and they try to get help for it, then I'm doing something good for other people. That's the one thing about not drinking is that you observe a lot. And I watch how people, there are those true social drinkers, and then there are those people that are, every single night they're out having cocktails every single night of the week. And then I see some of those people that say, yeah, I'm going to have a dry January, and they do. And then there's other people that say, I'm going to have a dry January, and they try and they can't.
Well, it's certainly a very inspiring story, Bob. And any closing thoughts, any things that maybe we did not cover?
No, I don't know that mine is the normal story for folks.
I'm not sure there is a normal. Everyone is different.
I was just going to say that. I don't know but I was going to say, but what is the norm?
Yeah.
I think everybody has their own experiences with alcohol. Well, I guess it's all about your own metabolism and your own personality and what have you. But if you allow it to get a hold of you, it'll grab a hold of you, and then to get, it's just like smoking cigarettes. Nicotine is such an addictive. And for people that try to quit smoking, and you watch people struggle to not have a cigarette. Even in this day and age when all the bad stuff that it does to you, people go on this mindset of, well, it's not going to happen to me. Oh, I'm just going to have, I don't smoke that much. I smoke a pack a week, not a pack a day. So it's not that bad. Everything in moderation. Well, yeah, for some things, and alcohol, it can be your best friend as far as having a good time with friends and being social, or it could be your worst nightmare. When I talk about it to people, if I could just help one or two people realize it and get them to a place where it's not an issue for them, then I feel I've done good, because because I know what I went through, and I know how hard that was on my family and my friends and things like that, because it was really tough for them too. It's funny because there were some friends that said they had no idea, and there were other friends that said, I kind of thought you drank a lot. So and I guess everybody's perception. It's all about what they're observing too, I guess.
Well, I appreciate you're telling your story because, again, everyone
No
is
problem.
different. I think it will certainly do some good, and I admire you on the 4th of April of putting that out there as a way
Thank
of doing something good for others. And I'm sure a lot of people
Thank
will
you.
listen to this interview and say, my goodness. Obviously, a lot of people that have been on this show have been either through treatment or they're in AA. But I always say, if you've got at least 1 year of continuous sobriety, I want to talk to you and I want to find out how you did it, number one, how bad it got, number two, and number three, how you're doing today. And
Yeah.
you're doing amazingly well today, and I
Thank
salute
you.
you. I salute you. Quite a story from quite a guy. Bob Sttedman, still sober 11 years after coming face to face with death. By the way, I want to remind listeners of this podcast, if you would like to tell your story of recovery, regardless of the path that you've chosen, and as long as you've been in continuous recovery for a year or more, we want to hear from you. Recovery Coast to Coast at Comcast.net. Now, coming up next, actor Lou Gossett Jr. will share some reflections on recovery, what we say, and how we say it. And he'll do that in just 30 seconds.
Alcohol is running your life. You want help, but can't take time away from work to get it. Where do you turn? Contact Sundown M Ranch. Sundown M Ranch outpatient programs have helped thousands recover from addiction without losing time on the job. Nationally recognized for innovative, effective, and affordable treatment programs, Sundown M Ranch will help you put your life back on track. Go to www.sundown.org to learn more.
Now, as promised, here is iconic actor and a guy in long-term recovery, Lou Gossett Jr.
It's been a while, but the images are still etched sharply in our minds. Dad passes out after being in a drunken rage, and not a word is said about his behavior. We come home from school bursting with pride, and as usual, no one wants to hear about it. We have a serious problem, and instead of guidance, we get the same old guilt-provoking salt-in-the-wound message. I blame myself for the way you turned out. If there was a common denominator in our dysfunctional families, clearly it was the lack of honest and open communication. What exchanges there were tended to be manipulative, confusing, and hostile. Those were the influences that shaped our ability to communicate. No wonder there was such disharmony and tension in so many of our relationships. Learning to be better communicators is a continuing challenge, but we're making progress. We're putting aside the negative influences of the past and learning from scratch. We're communicating in ways that clear the air instead of causing pain. We're being as honest and straightforward as we can. We're trying to bring the spirit of love and caring into what we say and how we say it. Thought for today? Do I say what I mean and mean what I say?
Well, that wraps up this edition of Recovery Coast to Coast, the national podcast. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please share it with your friends. You can find all of our podcasts at recoverycoasttocoast.org. And if you'd like to get in touch, our email is recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. Also, please hit the subscribe or follow button. That's free, and you'll be notified the next time we publish a podcast. And remember, if you know someone who's experiencing problems with alcohol or any other drug, here's a 24-hour national helpline that offers free information and confidential treatment referrals. Spanish-speaking individuals are available as well. It's 1-800-622-HELP. And we encourage you to check out findsupport.gov. It's a fairly new website designed for individuals, families, and friends, with information including how to pay for treatment, including low-cost treatment and free treatment options. You can find healthcare support, how to help someone else, or find help for yourself. It's all in one place at findsupport.gov. And join us next time for America's Voice for Recovery, Recovery Coast to Coast, the national podcast. Another shout out to our good friends at Sundown M Ranch, sundown.org, where recovery begins. I'm Neil Scott, reminding you to stay healthy, live in gratitude, and be kind to others. Remember, The bright side of addiction is recovery. Pass it on.